Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing on an organ whose function we really take entirely for granted, the heart.
We really do.
When we talk about the heart, it's usually about blood pressure or cholesterol, but beneath that sort of mechanical pump is an electrical system of stunning complexity.
Oh, absolutely. It operates on the tightest schedules you can imagine.
I mean, if the timing is off by just a few milliseconds, the whole system can destabilize.
That's absolutely right. Our sources today detail the intrinsic rulebook of the cardiac muscle, the myocardium, and our mission is to cut through that complexity.
So what's the plan?
We're going to define the heart's 4 essential built-in rules, explore the critical timing windows that, enforce that stability, and then analyze the fascinating chaos that happens when an uninvited guest arrives.
The extrasystole.
The extrasystole, that abnormal skipped beat you might occasionally feel.
Okay, so we're moving from the microscopic physics of heart muscle cells straight into the visible anomaly of the compensatory pause.
Think of it as a detective story.
I like that. So we first establish the perfect routine.
And then we figure out how the crime, the extra beat, was committed and why the system enforces silence right after.
Let's start with the absolute foundation then. These 4 core properties that let the heart do its thing, completely independent of our conscious thought. When you look at the cardiac muscle, you realize it's just fundamentally different from every other muscle in the body.
Completely different.
It follows 4 major rules that ensure this continuous self-regulated function. The first one, and the reason your heart doesn't need your brain to remind it to beat, is autorhythmicity.
Autorhythmicity is this magnificent capability of the heart muscle cells, particularly the pacemaker cells in the SA node, to just spontaneously initiate an action potential.
It's the heart's own internal clock.
It's the heart's intrinsic clock, yeah. It means the heart is pre-programmed to keep time, beating reliably on its own, even if you severed it from all external nervous input.
Now, wait a minute. If the heart has its own internal clock, its own built-in pacemaker, why does the nervous system even bother controlling it at all?
Ah, good question.
Is that external control just secondary tuning?
It is entirely secondary tuning.
No.
The autonomic nervous system modifies the rate. It doesn't initiate the rate.
Okay.
It acts like a gas pedal or a brake, speeding the rhythm up with the sympathetic system or slowing it down with the parasympathetic. But that internal rhythm, the autorhythmicity, is always the foundation.
Got it. So once that signal is generated, the muscle needs to be ready to execute. That brings us to property number 2, excitability.
Which is simply the muscle's readiness to respond to that self-generated stimulus. It's primed and waiting.
And once that electrical wave is generated, that action potential, it has to travel, right?
It has to travel instantly across the entire muscle mass to ensure synchronization. That's conductivity. If the cells didn't conduct that excitation rapidly and uniformly, you wouldn't get a synchronized squeeze.
You'd get a chaotic quiver.
A chaotic quiver, exactly. Which brings us to the actual mechanical output, contractility.
The ability to actually shorten and squeeze in response to that signal.
So 4 rules. Generate the signal, be ready for it, spread it everywhere, and then execute the contraction.
It sounds simple when you list them like that.
It does. But what's truly genius is how these 4 properties interact with time, specifically to ensure safety. And this is where the concept of the refractory period comes in.
Tell us about that critical timing window.
We're focusing specifically on the absolute refractory period. This is the interval right after an electrical firing, when the voltage-gated sodium channels are completely inactivated. Meaning you literally cannot excite the muscle again no matter how powerful the stimulus is. It's the heart's mandatory timeout.
It's a safety fuse.
A perfect analogy.
Because if the heart could be stimulated again while it was already contracting, you'd get a continuous spasm, which is tetanus.
Right, and that would be fatal. The pump couldn't relax to refill.
So how long is this fuse?
It's surprisingly short, but incredibly precise.
Okay.
About 180 milliseconds.
Okay, give me some context for that number.
Well, the full electrical action potential, the signal itself, lasts between 200 and 220 milliseconds. But here's the kicker. The actual mechanical contraction of the muscle takes a full 250 milliseconds.
So the physical squeeze of the heart actually outlasts the electrical event that triggered it.
By a good margin.
And that 180 millisecond absolute block ensures that the heart is already well into its relaxation phase before it's even allowed to consider a new beat. That 180 millis window it's the guardian of the heart's stability. Okay, so we have this system built on rigid rules and a mandatory 180 millisecond blackout period. Yet you and I, or you listening, may occasionally feel that
Hmm.
that disconcerting flip-flop.
The skipped or extra beat, the extrasystal.
Right. If the system is so strictly controlled, how does that chaos even sneak in?
The sneak attack occurs because of an abnormal production of impulses. They come from an ectopic focus spot other than the normal SA or AV node that just decides to fire prematurely.
So it's a rogue signal.
It's a rogue signal that momentarily hijacks the system.
But can this really happen in a completely healthy person? I mean, we often associate these skips with serious heart conditions.
And that's a critical distinction the sources make.
Yeah.
While extrasystoles are definitely a common sign of, pathological changes in the conducting system, like an injury or ischemia, they're also noted to occur in perfectly healthy people.
What triggers it then?
In those cases, the triggers are environmental or emotional. Extreme stress, heavy caffeine or alcohol intake, or nicotine use. The system is fundamentally sound, but it can be agitated.
So an external trigger causes a cell somewhere else to become overly excitable and just fire?
Pretty much.
But with that absolute refractory period locking everything down, how does this rogue beat manage to interrupt the scheduled cycle?
It exploits a very narrow window, the phase of relative refractoriness.
Okay.
Remember, the absolute period is 180 milliseconds of total silence. But after that, the heart enters this relative refractory phase where it can be stimulated again, but only if the impulse is overwhelming.
So it takes a massive electrical punch to get a response during that time.
We call it a suprathreshold stimulation, yeah. A stimulus powerful enough to override the ongoing recovery process.
And here's the really incredible detail about the timing.
The amplitude, the strength of that resulting extrasystole is directly dependent on when it hits during that relative phase.
So timing dictates power.
Completely. If the abnormal impulse lands early in the phase, the contraction will be weak. But the closer that irritation is to the very end of relative refractoriness, the greater the strength of that extra contraction.
That sets the stage for the second half of the mystery. The extrasystole is the extra beat. But what really defines this event for most people is that mandatory, longer than usual silence that follows.
The compensatory pause.
Exactly. Why does the heart stop for a beat after it just jumped ahead?
It's just a beautiful illustration of the heart prioritizing its primary rhythm.
Yeah.
Think of the SA node as the central metronome, and it's completely oblivious to that rogue impulse that just fired.
Yeah.
The SA node just keeps generating its normal action potentials on its regular, predictable schedule.
So the metronome hasn't paused?
And the metronome hasn't paused.
Blood.
The muscle itself has been exhausted. The extrasystole, that sudden abnormal contraction, forced the heart muscle back into a refractory state. So when the next normal action potential, the one generated on time by the SA metronome, arrives at the muscle,
it hits a wall.
it hits tissue that is already in its mandatory refractory period.
So because the tissue is already exhausted from the extrasystole, it just ignores the scheduled normal beat.
Precisely. The normal beat is effectively blocked. No contraction occurs. It's like the system missed an automated cycle.
And that forced delay creates the pause.
It creates that significant time gap before the next SA impulse arrives, which finally allows the heart to contract normally and fully resets the rhythm. That silence is the heart self-correcting.
That makes so much intuitive sense now. It's not the SA node pausing, it's the muscle ignoring a signal because it's still recovering from the unexpected workout.
The compensatory pause is therefore mandatory. It's a non-negotiable consequence of interrupting the cycle. It's the systemic protection against continuous arrhythmia. The system has to regain control, and the pause is how it does it.
Okay, so now we know the mechanism, a rogue firing followed by a mandatory system reset. But where that rogue impulse comes from drastically changes what the event looks like on an ECG.
It does. Our sources outline 3 distinct types. We classify them based on their origin point: the atrium, the ventricle, or that junctional area near the AV node.
Let's start at the top.
Atrial extrasystole. This means the extra stimulation originates from an abnormal spot somewhere in the atrial tissue.
And what's the giveaway on the electrical readout? Just to remind everyone, the ECG tracks different waves. The P wave is the atrium contracting, and the QRS complex is that big, powerful ventricular squeeze.
That context is vital, thank you. So since the atrial extra beat still manages to follow the normal highway down to the ventricles, the resulting QRS complex, the ventricular squeeze, it looks structurally normal. But the P waves of the ECG are distorted because the signal didn't come from the official starting point in the SA node. That distorted P wave is the telltale sign.
Got it. Okay, moving down the electrical plumbing. The most commonly felt skipped beat is often the ventricular extrasystole. And contextually, this can pop up during stressful conditions like Acute hypoxia, a lack of oxygen, where some muscle cells in the ventricle become irritable and just fire off.
That irritable cell triggers its neighbors, and you get a ventricular extrasystole. Critically, this type is accompanied by that very pronounced compensatory pause.
Same mechanism as before, I assume.
Same basic principle. The next normal SA impulse arrives, hits the ventricle while it's refractory from the extra beat, and is blocked.
So the key characteristic of this one, besides the big pause, is that because it happens outside the normal conduction path, the QRS complex itself will look distinctly abnormal, maybe wider, on the ECG.
Exactly. It's a messy electrical wave because it didn't use the proper rapid transit system.
Which brings us to our final type, the nodal extrasystole. This one originates from the AV node area, right between the atria and the ventricles.
Yeah.
What's the unique complication here?
Because of its central location, it can cause retrograde stimulation of the atrium.
Meaning backward.
It means the electrical impulse fires backward, stimulating the atria from the bottom up. Instead of the wave sweeping down conventionally, it sweeps upward.
Backward is always complicated in an electrical system.
It is. The consequence is highly distinctive on the ECG. The P wave, representing the atrial squeeze, becomes negative. It's inverted.
Because the signal came from the wrong direction.
Precisely. And depending on the timing, that negative P wave is either completely buried inside the QRS complex or it appears right after it.
And like the others.
Like the others, this nodal event forces an extra post-extrasystole pause to occur. The primary SA rhythm eventually resets. The location of the rogue signal determines the visual pattern, but the timing correction, that pause, it remains the same.
This has been a fascinating journey into the heart's absolute dependence on milliseconds. We move from the heart's foundational four properties
The basis of its self-sufficiency.
to that strict 180 millisecond time window of absolute refractoriness that acts as the ultimate safety net.
And we discovered that the only way to introduce chaos, the extrasystole, is by hitting the heart with a powerful stimulus at the precise moment it's recovering, during that relative refractory phase.
Then we analyze the required systemic correction, the compensatory pause, the heart forcing a beat of silence to ensure the SA node's rhythm regains control.
It really illustrates how finely tuned the whole system is.
It does. Even common triggers like stress or excess caffeine manifest as these complex, physics-driven electrical events. The system is resilient, but it's operating constantly on the boundary of that 180 millisecond safety margin.
And this brings us back to the level of precision we noted earlier, how the strength of the extrasystole depends entirely on when it interrupts that recovery period.
Right.
Which raises an important question for you to consider now that you know the rules. If the heart is so susceptible to a big enough stimulation during its recovery phase, how much subthreshold electrical noise and variation is the heart constantly generating and filtering out every single minute of every day without it ever resulting in a noticeable skip? It just reminds us that our seemingly steady heartbeat is the result of constant microscopic negotiation against internal electrical chaos.